There it is. Yeehaw. All right. Man, do we go all? Yeah, we go all the way. Okay. We figured it out. Hold on. We might not have figured it out. There it is. Okay. Little delay. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Thanks for hanging out. Let me see. Focus your last shit. Okay. Yeah. All right, we're working our way through it. I even have notes. It's going to be awesome. We're going to catch up on where we were. We're going to talk about where we are going. So if you're hanging out, let me know you're hanging out. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know how life has been. I'm going to get my drink of water here. I had this for a while, and I don't know if this is preferable. It doesn't seem like it wants to play, but there it is. Maybe that's preferable to me. Goofing off while I set things up, but I don't know. Maybe not. All right. Man. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to kind of slow down my day. I feel like I have been going... Irma, what's up? Welcome. Yeah, I'm slowing down. I feel like I've been going 100 miles an hour. I feel like life is moving very fast. So I'm going to take some time. I'm going to try to I'm going to learn how to pace myself through these live streams. I do think sometimes I feel like I have a lot to say, and it all kind of comes out in this sort of word vomit. And I don't want to add to the noise. You know, that's one of the things. Sorry about that. That's one of the things about the podcast is like, I want to spend meaningful time talking about things that are important to us. I want that time to be meaningful for you guys, and I want to just throw a bunch of stuff out there. So let me know how you're doing. If you have any questions, maybe type question or something like that. But essentially, one of the things that I like to do is sort of pick up the pieces from the last podcast that I did. Essentially, kind of go behind the scenes. This Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan episode, their conversation was interesting. Maybe I haven't heard enough of Jordan Peterson, or maybe I've heard enough, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. Let me know if I'm being too harsh on Jordan Peterson. My take on him was essentially very similar to my feelings after the Nashville We Who Wrestle with God tour that I went to. I thought it was good. I think he's good at starting the conversation for people who would be turned off otherwise to maybe the more overtly sort of Christianese type of stuff. Paul Vanderklay calls him the unauthorized exorcist, this person who shows up in scripture who's sort of like, exorcising demons in the name of Jesus, but hasn't really found Jesus. And I think that's where I left off with Jordan Peterson. I really do still think he's kind of there. He's the joker. He's the jester. He's getting people to think, but he's not. And what I was going to say is he's not really pointing people to Jesus, which I guess in a way is like, no duh. He's not trying to do that, I don't think. But that in and of itself seems like the sort of Christian thing, right? That's sort of like the Christian-y thing to do. Be like, oh, just point people to Jesus. But then you realize that's not, maybe saying something like that's not really helpful. So Jordan Peterson will say something like, you have to aim up to the highest possible good, and well, and then he tries to aggregate things out, and he does that whole process, and it at least gets people to think. But maybe for me, um, I think it would be like, it would be like Plato's cave, right? The whole idea is that you're liberated from the cave. I have a picture of it. Um, you're liberated from the cave. You come out in the bright morning hours. You see the sunshine. You see the world for what it really is. No longer just the images. No longer just the shadows on the wall. Right? You emerge from the cave. You emerge into the bright morning. And at least the way Socrates sort of puts it to some degree, and certainly within the Christian worldview, the idea is once you've seen the sky, once you've seen the world for what it really is, you sort of descend back into the cave, and you begin to talk to these people who are looking at the shadows and saying, these are just shadows of the forms. And the forms are really just pointing you to that thing in its ultimate form. And so, Jordan, when he was talking to Joe, kept kind of pointing upward, but never to the, what would it be? Sort of the essence, like the shadow and the form, and then the essence, right? The thing that gives that meaning. It's like Jordan kind of misses that. He talks about the true and the good. He sort of misses the beautiful, but I don't know. What do you guys think about, if you watch the Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan podcast? I don't know. I'd be interested to get more feedback on that. Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at chat. It felt like a lot of words and not enough substance. And I guess my point would be is, if you've seen the sky from up here, and then you're sort of here with Jordan Peterson discussing the forms, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get the forms. Like, the forms are there and they're important and all that, but the forms are ultimately pointing me to something greater. And I guess I just didn't ever get that from Jordan Peterson. Ish, like close, but not quite there. And so I guess I feel like I want to live here. I want to live up here and maybe come down into here. But I don't want to go down into here and talk about how interesting the forms and the shadows are. I want to go down into here to talk to people about what's outside the cave. If I'm making any sense, let me know. That was my feeling from Jordan Peterson, was just kind of like, we're still just down in here discussing what this might be, what it might be like out here, out of the cave, to see a horse, right? Like, this is where the horse would live, is up here, running through the plains, with the sun on its back. And down in the cave, there's the form of the horse, and then on the wall, there's the shadow of the horse. And so I'm like, man, I guess what I'm saying is, let's talk about the horse. And I guess maybe the horse is Jesus. I don't know. So that's where we were. This was an interesting one for me as well, because the video originally was blocked. YouTube did not like it originally. And so, again, this is sort of pulling back the curtain. I had to do some aggressive editing with this one, to make it clear that I was using it under the fair use guidelines. And in this next one, I think we're just going to have to see a little bit more of that sort of aggressive editing, which is sort of unfortunate, because I want to preserve the dialogue. I really do. I want to honor the dialogues that are going on, and I don't want to clip them too much, because then, I guess I would assume, I would think this as a person watching it, like, oh, what's he omitting? What's he not, what's he clipping out? And if you're here in the live stream, you'll get some of my process, which is I'm gonna clip out some of the ums. I'm gonna clip out some of the pauses. I need to do just more aggressive editing so that it's more clear that I'm using this under a fair use guidelines. And in order to do that, I need to make significant enough alterations to the original podcast so that the AI that's scrubbing through the video doesn't think it's matched. Now I do that. I don't actually record the original podcast. I alter the podcast of the Joe Rogan podcast, or with whatever, if I'm using Russel Brand or Jordan Peterson or any of the others, I would do the same. I alter it as it comes into my system. And so, but I guess maybe it's just not enough. So I'm never actually engaging with the original content. I'm always engaging with it in a little bit of an altered state, and you might pick up on that. Sometimes it's slightly faster, or obviously I've got the frame around it. So anyway, I say all that to say, I think with Joe Rogan being on YouTube, it's weird though, because they shouldn't match up. The audio should not match up. There might be sections that match, but they won't ultimately match. So I don't know why this one got hit so hard, but I've never had a video blocked before. This one was blocked. I could not post it, which is why I'm a little bit behind on my schedule. This one finally did come out on Monday, but I was planning on having the Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan conversation out on Monday. And actually this Alan Graham conversation, I was going to post it today, and I was going to live stream tomorrow, but here we are. At some point, it might be time prohibitive to engage in the Joe Rogan content, because I'm assuming it's just a huge channel. So I'm assuming there's lots of eyes on it. And so they're going to flag it. But yeah, interesting. I never had a video actually blocked before. I've gotten copyright claims. I've gotten stuff that says, hey, it looks like you're using copyright material. And then I appeal it. I say, I'm using this for educational purposes. We're having a dialogue about the nature of theology and how it emerges within the realm of podcasting, or in pop culture at large. Which we'll get to here, because it got a little funny. Talking about pop culture, things got a little funny, so you want to stick around for that commentary. It'll come up here, but I wanted to come back and kind of talk about the process of this one, because I think that's part of it. I think that is part of us learning to use the medium that's in front of us. And what's up, Chad? Man, good to see you. And so I think kind of me, at least, sort of sharing with you all kind of the process, it's helpful for me to sort of dialogue that out, hear your feedback, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see. So eventually I got that one through, not blocked. It's available. It's funny, I don't even have a contents claim on it. So they just didn't like, the fair use thing is a little fuzzy. What does meaningful alterations mean? It's not really described. So can you use clips that are 30 seconds long? Can you use clips that are a minute long, 3 minutes long, et cetera, et cetera? But I really thought that this Alan Graham conversation with Joe Rogan was fascinating. And I've done this a few times on the channel. This one is bigger than Joe Rogan, comparing two podcasts that came out a day away from each other. I actually still want to do this Jimmy Dore podcast, but the near-death experience from Sebastian Junger and then Rampage Jackson, those two conversations sort of played with each other the way Jordan Peterson's conversation and Alan Graham's conversation played with each other. Because like I said, Jordan Peterson seems to be still sort of down here talking about sort of the gospel of Christ without Christ, if that makes sense. And I even asked Paul Vanderklay this at one point, because he's sort of the Jordan Peterson expert. If Jordan Peterson's gospel is sort of a utilitarian gospel, and I think he agreed with that, like that it's sort of a gospel without Christ. It's not embodied. He's not pointing you to the person of Christ. That was my conclusion. It's philosophical, and what's really funny, I mean, and again, just like the Rampage and Sebastian played with each other, Jordan comes, he essentially gives you the philosophic framework for the gospel, or whatever he might call that. I mean, it's not a gospel if there's no Christ. If you're not ultimately pointed towards the person of Christ, not just the idea of the person of Christ, if that makes sense. And then Alan Graham pops on, and Alan Graham literally embodies the gospel by going and reaching the poor, the downtrodden, the marginalized in the name of Christ, and is trying to live his life embodying the gospel. So you have one podcast essentially giving you the philosophical framework with no embodiment, with no personal connection to Christ. And then Alan Graham is like not really interested in giving you the philosophy. He's just like, we need to care for people. We need to love God and love our neighbors. That's what we do. We do that. And he even said at one point, he's like, Joe is trying to ask him these sort of apologetics questions. And he's like, look, man, God made this world. He's going to have to sort it out. I'm not the sorter outer. That's not my job. I'm here to love people. And I just thought, oh my gosh, you have to, and so of course, it feeds this theory that I have that, one, the Joe Rogan podcast is sort of this barometer for culture, but podcasting at large gives us a glimpse into the soul of humanity and gives us a glimpse into maybe sort of what God is doing sovereignly with this medium. The more we talk, the more we engage with one another, it does seem like God is using it. And so when you have these two podcasts back to back, I just find that fascinating. I found that fascinating. Peterson lacks grace and mercy. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like there's a point of contact that needs to be made. And it does not seem like Jordan Peterson has made that touch point, that point of contact. Grace and mercy. How does that doesn't come to you philosophically, right? Grace, it comes to you because it's embodied in the person of Christ, and it's a gift that he gives you. And when you come into contact with Christ, you come into contact with that grace and that mercy, right? Something like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It will be interesting. I'd like to hear more from Paul Vanderklay on Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson. Some other thoughts that I had was just, this is my notes, if it's lame, let me know, but it's going to keep me from being a little too ADD here. I don't know enough of the young philosophy to really properly analyze Jordan Peterson. That was one of the takeaways that I came across. It's like, Christian Baxter is here. He made it. I'm all for talking about archetypes and all that stuff that seems to come from sort of his time studying Jung, but it's more than that. You need to take the next step. Christ is the archetype for all human history. Everything falls from him. What is that passage? He is before all things, and in him all things hold together, right? What is that? It's been on my mind, Colossians 1:17. It's been on my mind this week. We'll get to Revelation. We'll get to the apocalypse here at the end. What did I just say? Colossians 1:17. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So I don't mind, the conversations of Jesus as the archetype, if we can acknowledge the fact that those are archetypes because they flow from Christ. It's not that, again, people will use this to sort of throw shade on the Bible. It's like, oh yeah, these Christians were just sort of crafting their own religion or whatever, and they're borrowing from all these other pagan religions, and it's not quite the way it went down. You can think of the this stuff is that the Bible has always been conversant with culture, and it can be that because we live in God's world. This is His world. We live by His rules, and Christ holds all things together, and so. in a very real way, all of history, whether it came before Christ or after Christ, is an echo of Christ himself. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That's a powerful statement. So don't mind the archetype stuff. This is the wrong one. Anyway, maybe I just need to brush up on my Jungian philosophy. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Joe goes into the conversation with Alan Graham. I don't know. Again, I said this before when we were talking about the Rampage Jackson, Sebastian Junger correlation. There was another one a while back. Hang with me here for a second. It was around the time that Joe was talking to Diana Walsh Pasolka. I'm in the neighborhood. That's too far back. Yeah, that's too far back. Pasolka. Where is it? Oh, it was this one. Jesus Emerges in the Battle of Messengers. There's all these different podcasts that I think there was 4 of them that I highlighted from, all essentially having the same themes. And so you really do get a sense of Joe using his podcast as like a organic large language model, as like a information gathering machine, as some sort of dialogue machine. So it's fascinating. It just keeps happening. And if you guys notice it happening in other places, let me know, because this is part of what interests me about doing the podcast. Is part of the theme, part of the things that I want to continue to highlight whenever I can is what sort of themes are emerging that seem to be disassociated from one another. It was that do you remember back in the day when so many people were talking about Hermes? There was a reason. There was a reason for that. I don't remember where it is. Anyway, I did a podcast on it. Search for Hermes in the Strange Theology podcast. You'll find it. Okay. So there you go. I'm going to do the Alan Graham one. That's forthcoming. I thought it was fascinating. Alan Graham runs a podcast called The Gospel Con Carne, the gospel with meat, with flesh. And so it's so perfect. Jordan Peterson presents the gospel with no flesh, with no meat, with no Christ. Alan Graham, next episode. And then, Michael Malice, this is going to be hilarious. That one's going to be hilarious. I don't know that I'll have any commentary on it, but it will be fun. It will be fun. All right. And this was one of the other interesting themes, again, with the Jordan Peterson, Alan Graham connection, is in his Jordan Peterson conversation, they were looking at this sculpture from Michelangelo. They were looking at this and just going, wow, how beautiful. And that was the idea, is they were talking about what's true and what's good. They sort of skipped over beautiful. Okay, so this is Socrates in the Republic. True, good, and beautiful. And so this was the beauty that emerged. And what it is about art that depicts these messages for us. It's sort of a story. It frozen in time. It's sort of this freeze frame of a whole story that's going on. And so Joe and Jordan spent some time looking at this, which I thought was really interesting. And again, in the very next episode with Alan Graham, they started looking at this painting, The Incredulity of St. Thomas, Caravaggio. And so it's just fascinating the role of art is playing in essentially, I do believe God is pursuing Joe Rogan just like he pursues all of us. It's just that Joe Rogan happens to have a podcast where millions of people are watching it happen. Only watched part of the newest Peterson Jerry episode. Did Joe admit out loud he's become a Christian, or just alluded to it? It's really, so that was one thing that I was really interested in. Thanks, Brian, for that question, because it was something I wanted to talk about. I know Peterson told an interviewer a little while ago that Joe Rogan had. Okay, so that was in the Pints with Aquinas. So Jordan Peterson was was talking with, and I don't remember the host of Pints with Aquinas, but they were talking about this phenomenon where a bunch of podcasters are becoming Christian, or at least Christian curious. So again, there's something about this medium that God is using sort of sovereignly, and it didn't come up. Well, there is a section that I skipped over, the Peterson Academy section. I don't think it would have come up there. But just for the sake of time, I did skip over that section. I spent most of my time talking about focusing on the we who wrestle with God part of it, but he didn't. As far as I know, if somebody else picked up on it and I didn't, Joe did not. Yeah, Peterson said Joe figured it out in a list of podcasters who had become Christian, because they were talking about Russel Brand, who had become Christian. They were talking about how Jordan Peterson is very, sort of Christian curious. I mean, he wrote a book called We Wrestle with God. He just did, I forget how many whatever conferences, I don't know what you call those, where he goes up and talks. I mean, it's amazing. He goes up and talks for an hour and a half I saw the one in Nashville. There was like 8,000 people there, and he just talks about the Bible. I mean, it's crazy. And so, yeah, he said that Joe had figured it out. It's really interesting. I will say this. I don't want to make too much of this, but he had Jordan Peterson on. I really thought this was going to be the Friday episode. And I don't know this for sure. I mean, I need to maybe do a little bit more, but it does seem like those Friday episodes tend to be a little bit more high profile people. And then what, the team at JRE does is sort of save those so that there's like a weekend buzz, some high profile person, or maybe a fight or something like that. And then it carries over to Monday. And usually Monday is a pretty big name too, I would think. Or it just happens to be, somebody that Joe's interested in talking to. Excuse me. Peterson, however, was the Thursday episode, and it was Alan that was the Friday episode. So how does Joe, one, he sort of, I don't know, again, maybe we're reading too much into it. He put Alan, who is just a straight at you Christian, Catholic man, living in Austin, feeding the homeless, caring for those who are downtrodden, how does Joe connect with him? Where do you meet a guy like that? Well, you meet him going and caring for the homeless. You meet him on mission. You meet him because you, your family, your church, somebody connected you. He mentions it in the podcast that they were at a fundraiser. So Alan was raising funds for his project, which is Mobile Loaves and Fishes. It's in Austin, Texas. And so Joe was at least there curious about how he could donate his money to a Christian organization that's feeding the homeless. So that's a pretty Christian thing to do. Now, I don't think Joe, he hasn't come out and publicly said anything other than what you were talking about with Pints of Aquinas. Is sort of Jordan let it slip. I was curious for a while if they were even going to do this, because I thought maybe Jordan letting that slip kind of made Joe mad. Like, whoa, hold on, bud. Like, you're sort of speaking for me, speaking out of turn. And someday I will say, Joe will find Christ. I believe that. I believe that about I believe that about everybody I've ever met. There's nobody that I've ever met that's like, I feel like, oh, you're outside. Like, there's no helping you. And I believe it will happen. And I think that I think that he will be a good person, like Russel Brand, for the church to engage with. I think that there is, in some ways, sort of a mysticism. I always feel is maybe the wrong word, but some sort of return to a Christian mystic experience. And in this conversation with Alan Graham, he talked about doing the Camino. What is it called? The Camino. It's the pilgrimage for St. James. I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Protestant myself, but what is it called? Camino de... Is it Santiago? Jeez, come on, I gotta get my, yeah, Camino de Santiago. He talked about doing that pilgrimage, right? So that's an experience. That's a sort of mystical experience, if you will. Um, and and that's something that I think would attract Joe Rogan. That would attract a person like Joe Rogan, like a Russel Brand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Pints of Aquinas thing with Jordan, you almost catch a little bit of him kind of, oh well, and he definitely sidesteps it because again, I forget the interviewer's name, forgive me, but he kind of doubles down on it. He goes, "Oh, Joe Rogan," and Jordan goes, "Well, yeah, Joe's figuring it out, that type of thing." So he kind of sidesteps it, um, and but we'll see, man. If Joe, when Joe finds Christ, when Jesus finds him, it's not going to be your normie Western evangelical kind of Christianity. I certainly think God can use that. One of the subtexts to this, and I'll move on to the Olympics and everything else, but one of the subtexts to this is God uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. Sorry, it's Corinthians. And so I think it will be that. I think it will be something like that. It'll be the sensible testimony of an Alan Graham that would win a person like Joe Rogan or connect a person like Joe Rogan to the person of Christ, not the sophisticated philosophy of Jordan Peterson, I think. Yeah, Tucker's podcast is now on. I guess that is news, since podcasting is one of the things that we talk about. Um, and Tucker is a funny one on that subject, Christian. Tucker is a funny one because though he's professing Christian, he always gives it the caveat that he's not a very good Christian. And I will be honest, again, foolish things of the world to confound the wise. I think that that's useful. I think that that's valuable. The church that I'm a part of, our motto is that it's a perfect place for imperfect people. Our pastor has said openly, like, that he feels more comfortable going to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting than he does going to most churches, and that the church should be that. You should be able to come and feel like there's no problem with you being there. You're not in a room of perfect people. You're in a room of imperfect people. And so the fact that Tucker Carlson has the #1 podcast in the world right now, and though that's not the main content that he talks about, certainly, it does come up. And when it comes up, I think he has a very interesting way of portraying his Christianity, right? So I saw something somewhere that like Christian podcasts are actually pretty high up on those sort of podcast brackets. One, I'll give a shout out. One that you should check out if you haven't already is the Haunted Cosmos podcast. Yo, shout out to the Haunted Cosmos. This is a little bit. There are a few things. There are a few things in the works behind the scenes here on the podcast, and I won't say too much, but yeah, shout out to these guys. I won't say too much because I want to make sure things actually happen. But yeah, these guys have a great podcast, man. And I think it's part of the reenchantment. I think it's part of, let's move on. We'll move on to some of my, the Olympics. I guess I'm going a little bit backwards, but it's the Christendom has had a series of revolutions, and in them Christianity has died. Christianity has died many times. It's risen again, for I had a God who knows the way out of the grave. And in Chesterton's quote here, one of the things that he unpacks is every time it looks like Christianity is going to die, it's some heresy that actually ends up having the fatal wound and dying off of Christianity. And so are we seeing that? Are we seeing something of that? There's a reenchantment going on, that it was the modern naturalistic approach to scripture that watered it down and made the gospel so unappealing to people? And is it the re-enchantment that people are finding appealing and interesting? Again, to sort of Joe Rogan's Christian mysticism idea. Yeah. So it's happening on my podcast. It's a hive mind conversation, and I'm benefiting from it, like Joe. What exactly are you talking about there? Sorry, I probably missed it. Yeah, I mean, you're benefiting from participating in the podcast. Is that what you're talking about? Because as you participate in it, um, it really is. It's like, now I use the term opponent processing probably wrong. I think of it more like thesis antithesis. It's like there's a backdrop, right? And somebody who's different from me is going to give me a backdrop. I can say my ideas, and then they're going to give me some feedback, and I'm going to go, yeah, that does sound stupid. Or, okay, that does make sense. That makes way more sense than I thought it would. And when you have a podcast, that does seem to be part of the process. Christian, I don't know if that's exactly what you were talking about. But it's interesting because you saw that with Russel Brand. Now, I didn't cover really any of Russel Brand's conversion, which is a bummer. I was doing other things with the podcast, and I have limited time. I started a bookmark thread on X here to try to cover it, but I just never got around to it. Elon Musk's tweet here: unless there's more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish. He's saying that in the context of this Olympic Games. He's basically saying, if you're just going to get mocked, Christianity will perish. It's like, yeah, well, Christianity has died 1,000 times, man, but it has a God who knows the way out of the grave. So what ends up dying is like I said, sort of the heresy or what have you. Yeah. I mean, essentially, he didn't go into too much detail. Sorry, Christian's comment. Joe going to the fundraiser for Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which is essentially a Christian organization. I mean, he's there for a reason. He's wanting to donate to a Christian missionary movement, essentially, or whatever organization. Okay, yeah, the George Jenko. I need to watch that. Yeah, I'm interested in that one. I need to reconnect with Russell's story because, again, I think he fits into sort of that Christian mysticism side of things. And again, help me with a better word, a Christian re-enchantment. Yeah, something like that. So that was interesting. Art played a role. It again brings those two podcasts together. Now, What Do You Mean? John from What Do You Mean had some really interesting things to say about the Olympics. I wonder if I could play a section of this and not get in too much trouble. What do you guys think? What do we think? Do I have my headphones? I thought he did a really good job. Let's see what we can do.
Statement, they're supposed to be against any form of discrimination and also according to the Olympics mission statement, they're supposed to be against any form of discrimination and also opposed to any political abuse of sports and athletes. But as soon as the opening ceremony started, it proved
that was a lie.
They started off the Olympics with things like this, and the one that has people offended the most was this, which appears to be a rendition of the Last Supper of Christ with the disciples, but instead of Jesus and disciples, they were replaced with drag queens. And
okay, drag queens, Dionysus. It's pretty good.
Obvious offense to Christians everywhere. And as you would expect, Christians were incredibly upset by it, and understandably so. The Olympics is supposed to be a time to unite all other countries around the world in the spirit of sports. But instead of uniting, they seem to go out of their way to completely offend 2.6 billion people and make the main focus of the event political as opposed to sports.
Here's what was interesting about this as well, is we have covered kind of this Luciferian spirituality that, it's sort of in the backdrop here, sort of geopolitical things. When was the last time? I think it was the live stream, actually. yeah, Luciferian political theory. I guess it's this one here too. We've touched on it a few times. I thought this Jonathan Peugeot clip describing the Luciferian spirituality was really good. Used that a few times. And what you're seeing with the Olympics, right, is that it's supposed to be this global, multicultural event. And I thought Youth Pastor Theologian pointed something out that was really, really awesome. The Olympics provides a powerful talking point about the coming day when all people will bend the knee before our great God and Savior. This is the good news worth discussing. So you see that, there will be a day when all nations will gather in peace and joy and lift up in unified voices, right? This is kind of the Olympics idea. Praise their Father. Today is not that day, but the Olympics is a beautiful foretaste of that coming. Well, maybe not so much. But after that, so this is from Revelation 7. So this is the gospel vision. This is the biblical vision of, what John from What Do You Mean just pointed out, that it's supposed to be this unifying geopolitical event, multicultural event, and yet it's divisive. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hand, crying out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, the Lamb. And so this Olympics, I pose the question of have the Olympics sort of always been sort of demonic or whatever? In a way, if what it is man's attempt to create what ultimately God is creating, then yeah, it's Luciferian. It's in defiance of, it's in rebellion of. Now, I don't have anything against the Olympics. I think it's, for the most part, great. It seems like they've always had some issues, but it's a good idea. If it's humanistic, in the sort of secular humanistic vein, if it's this human utopia, then yeah, it's Luciferian. And to Jonathan Peugeot's point, it self-destructs. That's what it always happens, because rebellion, for the sake of rebellion, always ends up in self-destruction. He goes on.
Problem either. More and more non-Christians and people of other faiths are starting to agree that there seems to be a growing attack on Christianity. And frankly, Christians are sick of having their faith mocked and tired of being undercut and treated without the same respect that the other religions seem to have.
Whether it's Islam or Hinduism, Christianity is the most mocked religion.
And so in response to this problem, most Christians online seem to be saying things like, we need to take a stand and not allow the Olympics to mock our faith.
Yeah. Eventually he, check this out. I left a link in the description of the video. I thought his conclusion was really good as well.
And insults from non-Christians. One of the most direct places that I can think of in scripture that answers this question directly is found in 1 Peter 2, where Peter tells us how we should live as Christians if we find ourselves persecuted in a non-Christian society. He says, live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps.
That's good. Yeah, check it out. Check out that video. Yeah, live lives among the pagans, but live such good lives that people wonder, why is it that these people are unique? It's like the disciples before the Sanhedrin, after Jesus ascends, they said, they could see that they were unskilled, uneducated men, and yet they knew they'd been with Jesus. And so I think this was actually my thought, is many Christians were upset or moved, upset by the Olympics mocking the Last Supper featuring Dionysus and his drag queen followers, but overlooked the truth that Christ is actually the one mocking Dionysus. This was a good post. I didn't link this one, but I guess I can in the live stream. It was interesting. Let's see. Dionysus and Jesus represent two spiritual movements that are at war in the world. I don't disagree with that. I have a slightly different take. Dionysus is important because there are parallels, and Dionysus is sort of half human, half God. Of course, we believe that Jesus is fully God, fully man. He had a mortal mother and Zeus, divine father. He is the god of the festival, the feast, the wine. He's the god of the feast. The wine and the bread, or it's actually this sort of almost like this cornucopia looking thing with grapes and food is his symbol. But it's also sort of this debaucherous type of thing. It's this bestial sort of thing. The play is pretty brutal. If you've ever read the play by Euripides, it's interesting though, because there's this god who comes in drag, sort of incognito god, and is rejected, and yet I think that, like we were talking about earlier about Jesus being the archetype, and all of human history being sort of an echo or the archetype, Christ is he's not worried that Dionysus is this sort of well, I don't want to make too little of it, because I do think it's not good. You don't want to mock Jesus. If you don't want to meet Jesus, don't mock Jesus. He has a way of finding those people who mock him and throw him out. And hold on, this is where the ADD is kicking in here. I guess my point was, I don't think Jesus is concerned. A lot of Christians are, okay, and I get it. But he's not mocked, He is the one actually mocking. And what I don't mean that in like a cruel way, but I said earlier that the Bible, the gospel, is always conversant with the culture around it, the pagan culture around it. And that, yes, like Jordan Peterson was talking about, sort of this archetypal Christ. Everything is shaped after him. And even if it has been perverted and distorted, it's still being used by God to bring about his purposes. I mean, I think Paris had a blackout after this. Yeah, the Bacchae. Yeah. Hey, Upcycle, man, you're in that neighborhood. Yeah, the Bacchae and his followers, these drag queens, they're called. I think, yeah, they're whipped into this frenzy, and so it's not good. There's certainly things. I'm not saying that sort of Dionysus or the play, or the festival or whatever is truly foreshadowing of Christ. But something that Lou Marcos and I talked about we talked about, Kale and I talked about it on the Harry Potter episode, and Louis Marcos and I talked about it here on Stranger Themes, that it was often the pagans who found Christ so appealing because they had already become familiar with these ideas through these pagan stories and the pagan rituals. So when Christ came, the true bread and the true wine, everybody kind of went, oh, that's it. He's greater than Dionysus. And again, that's why I would say, like, Christians are worried or Christians are upset that Christ is being mocked. And I just think that Christ is the one sort of, again, mocking, not in a bad way, but just like being conversant with the culture around and saying, this is greater. Christ is he says, my body is true. My flesh is true food. Okay. My blood is true drink. He is the greater Bacchae. He is the greater feast. His blood is true drink. It's not the drink of the debaucherous orgies of the pagans. It is the drink of true joy, true life. What does Christ do at the wedding in Canaan? He provides more wine, right? he's sort of that fullness. So I guess I'm not too concerned, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm using a lot of words to say that. That's okay. It's okay to be late. I like that G.K. Chesterton. We've already had a little G.K. Chesterton quote earlier, but thanks for being here. I like that. I need to remember that I have the power to put those things on the member section. So yeah, my body is true food. And so we talked about the similarities, the God of the festival, wine, bread, new life, fertility, ups. Man, thank you, brother. Thank you for that. Wow. I also think it's funny that Dionysus does kind of appear in drag. Not a lot of people talk about this. I think that's interpretive a little bit. I'm going off of the Euripides. So in a way, the Olympics thing is sort of appropriate. You know, if this is Dionysus and his drag, and that is kind of appropriate for the play. But again, this God incognito God, rejected by his followers, but again, it's the pagans were sensitive to these things because the Bible wasn't afraid to become conversant with these ideas. The Bible said, okay, this is what you have. Let me show you how Yahweh is superior. You see this in the Old Testament all over the place. Heiser points this out. Tim Mackey points this out as well. And honestly, just to sort of circle back to Joe Rogan, I think Tim Mackey might be a great interview on Joe Rogan. What do you guys think? Give me the thumbs up for Tim Mackey. Yeah, man. Ups is such a legend. Thank you. It's so bright and colorful. It's distracting. I'm just sitting here being mesmerized by that robot dancing around. It's lovely. It's lovely. Hey, Ups, you sent me some branding. I never did ask. Can I use that? Can I show the people that? Yeah. Hey, oh man, Emily, you had a post. I was trying to find it. All right, I'll see if I can dredge it up. Maybe it might have to be for the next live stream. I'll use some branding. I have my first official piece of branding, courtesy of Upcycle Club. Gosh, Emily had a post. If you guys don't follow her on the platform formerly known as Twitter, but it was about this, right? And I was trying to find, I'll try to find it at some point. It was really good. Anyway, shout out to Emily. Yeah, Tim Mackey on Joe Rogan. That would be fun. Show the people. I don't know how to do it because it's on Discord. Let me see. I'll have to look. I don't even have Discord open. Okay. All right. So we talked about the pagans. We can close some of this. This was interesting. Okay. Plato rescues Eros from Dionysus. Yeah, that's the idea. The Dionysus idea of love is reduced to sex. Sex is not bad. Sex is great. Sex is a gift from God. C.S. Lewis, at one point, I forget what, I think this was in The Four Loves, he said, as soon as love becomes the God, it becomes a demon. And that's kind of the idea. You see the Bacchus by Euripides, it's a tragedy. It is a tragedy. And so, yeah, it doesn't end well. It's pretty brutal. And so, Plato rescues Eros from Dionysus. And this is the idea, Eros. Okay, love. And what is Plato, again, going back to Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, what we never got from Jordan Peterson was wisdom is embodied. If it's just an idea, then I think we're lost. And I never put that in the podcast episode, but I thought that was a really important point that I never really got to, is that Socrates says he's the lover of wisdom, eros, love, right? That's sort of the passionate or the erotic sort of love. But he's a lover of wisdom. And again, let me know what you guys think. As I read Plato and as I read the dialogues of Socrates, it always seemed to me that Socrates believed that wisdom was embodied. That, again, he had a foretaste of who Christ would be. I'm not saying he was a Christian. I don't know, but he got real stinking close. He got real close, even to the point where it does seem like he conceives of wisdom as embodied, and then he says he loves this thing. So true love, essentially true worship of that embodied wisdom. And so that's what Garlic Chancellor, I have actually never seen this. I saw his post, but I never saw his, this is the first time I've seen his account. Plato rescues Eros from Dionysus. Plato represents Eros not as a descent, sorry, it's kind of small, into the bestial release, but rather the ascent of the soul towards the beauty and the divine. I thought that was right. I thought that was correct. And so so he rescued it. And then this will be interesting. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Peugeot said he was going to post something tomorrow. Let me see. I have to go into my... How do I play this? Give me a second. I think I have to download it. Oh, there's a download button. Whoopsie daisies. No, yeah, sure. Save into downloads. Whoa, what are we doing? What's happening? Brave is opening. I'm not sure why. There you go. Okay, let's see if we got it. Okay, let me see. This is... Okay. It's debuting. Courtesy of our friend Upcycle Club. Your branding is debuting. Wait, that's not... Oh, I don't have it right. Again, I'll have the kinks worked out eventually. Let's see. Enjoy. Christians are people of the Word. We're always people of the Word. And we led the way in developing the thing that we now call a book. I like it. Oh, man. I love this stuff, guys. I thank you for being here. Ups, man. Love it. Yeah, man, we made the book. We made it. Now we're making podcasts. What's up with that? So this should be interesting. I'll be interested to see what Peugeot has to say about this. But the Olympic opening ceremonies is worse than you thought. In my video that premieres tomorrow, I'll be discussing specifically the images of Dionysus, the Last Supper, were used to simultaneously celebrate diversity and subvert Christianity. So it doesn't really celebrate diversity. That's the Luciferian trick. That's the Luciferian. It also discusses the purpose and meaning of symbolic demonstrations in culture. I think this will be really interesting. Really interesting. What's the significance of this in culture? Sorry, I think my volume got down. What does it mean? And again, Jonathan Peugeot was the one who kind of got me on that Luciferian spirituality that I then applied sort of to the sort of Luciferian political theory that's going on. And it's geopolitical. Again, to the point that Youth Pastor Theologian, which I closed, it's sort of a mock of what the kingdom of God will ultimately be, this multicultural unity of diversity and harmony. Alex, what's up? Good to see you. That is only made possible because of the person of Christ, right? Again, it can't be some secular humanist utopian idea that will self-destruct because it's ultimately Luciferian. outside of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there is no hope for humanity. There is no unity in diversity. I did like it. I need to learn how to make that kind of branding. I need to learn your ways. Yeah, this will be really interesting. So anyway, I think we've talked a little bit about, and there you go. There he is one more time. Again, probably appropriate given that Dionysus sort of comes in drag. There's lots of drag queens. But like I said, this is not mocking of Christ. Christ is not mocked. If anything, Christ is mocking this because he's pointing to the ultimate fulfillment of this. If you think about this for a second, think about the symbolism. We'll do a little Jonathan Peugeot ahead of Jonathan Peugeot. Think about the symbolism of this. All of these people are wearing masks. None of these people are who they are, right? I even think that in the Bacchus, the play of Dionysus written by Euripides, somebody maybe fact checks, I think he's wearing the comic mask, but the play itself is a tragedy. So there's this cognitive dissonance going on all throughout the play as its tragic theme unfolds. The actor is sort of in the comic mask. But at the table of Christ, you are who you truly are. You are who you are truly made to be. You're not in, metaphorically in drag. There's no costumes at the table of Christ. In fact, the true food and the true drink of Christ, it demands no hypocrisy. You cannot come to the table of Christ if you come to the table of Christ in any way that's hypocritical from what the table is. So like I was actually talking about this in a class at my church last week and the week before, the nature of communion and the fact that, well, at least in my tradition, we do confession before we take communion. And again, I'm from a PCUSA, or not PCUSA, forgive me, a PCA church. It's Reformed. It's it's not Catholic or anything like that. But we have a time of confession before we partake of communion together. And the reason you do that is, again, it's not that Jesus is not, he knows who you are, but do you know who you are? And he has asked you to come to his table, pure of heart, without any mixed, you come to the table of Jesus because it's his table. And what you find at his table is that you are who he created you to be. And then you look around the table at your brothers and sisters in Christ, and they are who they are supposed to be. And you see each other for who you are, in a sense, sort of like in the Garden of Eden, sort of naked, not truly naked. And it's a feast. It's a table. It's a wedding feast. And there's joy. I find that fascinating, that you can't come to the table of Christ in hypocrisy. This is hypocrisy. None of these people are who they are. They are in drag. They are in costume. They are in mask. And so the Luciferian spirituality inverts on itself and ends up eating itself and ends up destroying itself. This is probably done in the name of exclusivity and expression and all this other stuff. But what you find is, well, it's not actually inclusive. What does Peugeot say? Simultaneously celebrating diversity, yet subverting or excluding Christianity. All animals are equal, just some are more equal than others, right? Isn't that the line from Animal Farm? Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's edifying to be here. It's edifying to have friends. It's edifying to be virtually not alone, as they say. 11T. Thank you. That's not a Tolkien reference. Is it Elevensies? I'm thinking of Elevensies, not 11. Okay, what else is... Oh, the apocalypse. That's what's on the docket. Okay, so this is probably a good segue to the apocalypse. Yeah, we go from this to the apocalypse. What does apocalypse mean? It's uncovering. The word apocalypse means unveiling. All of these people are wearing masks. All of these people are veiled. They're all covered. Nobody is who they are, right? What is the apocalypse? What does John say? The word apocalypse means unveiling or uncovering. It means revelation, to be revealed, right? You know what? Actually, I already have it up. So are we in an apocalypse? You know, I don't necessarily mean like the end times. What I mean is, are we in a time of unveiling? Are we in a time of revealing? To Emily's question, can the Christian narrative be understood as a comedy? 100%. 100%. Taking off the masks. It essentially is an epic, which combines comedy and tragedy. An epic, okay, so real quick, a tragedy begins high and ends low. It usually ends in a funeral. That's what happens with Dionysus. So tragedy starts high, ends low. Comedy starts low and ends high. Comedy usually ends in a wedding. And if you take the Bible, it's essentially an epic. It begins high. You can look at it from the standpoint of humanity. We are in communion with God in the garden. There's a fall. There's a restoration. The New Jerusalem, the city of God. And it's beautiful. Guys, I've been reading the book of Revelation, and that book it's super encouraging. I think it's fully misunderstood. Or not fully. I think a lot of people misunderstand it because of all the plagues and stuff like that. But John is essentially, he's retelling the epic story of essentially the Old Testament. He's pulling from the Old Testament all the time. And so you can see those elements of comedy. So in the end, yes, it is a comedy. Why? Because it ends in a wedding. It's the banquet feast of the bridegroom, right? So it's a beautiful comedy. So yeah, and are we kind of in a time of unveiling, a time of... It's something Joe Rogan says on his podcast. He says that he thinks that it's going to get harder and harder for people to lie with the internet. It's harder and harder for things to be veiled. It's interesting too, because we were just talking about communion and that sense of unveiling, that sense of not pretending, right? And Joe says, I think it is going to get harder. And I don't know, you tell me if you agree with Joe Rogan. I mean, he's kind of he's not the pod father. He's like I don't know, but he's got one of the biggest podcasts. He's been doing it for a long time also. Tucker Carlson has a big podcast, but he's been a news anchor for a long time, but he hasn't been podcasting for very long. Are we in a time when both Luciferian and Christian spirituality are emerging? Is that what we're seeing? Is that what's being, sort of unveiled? Yeah, Brian, I think that, to Brian's question, and you guys can think about this. Let me know what you think. Are we in a time of unveiling? To Joe Rogan's point, is it harder for people to lie on the internet? Even though it's easier for them to lie, but it's harder for the lie to succeed. It's harder for the lie to endure because you have 100,000 people looking at it and scrutinizing it. So the lie never really lasts very long. You're seeing this right now, geopolitically, right? I mean, it's not 1963. We're not in 1963 anymore. Those lies aren't perpetuated, so you can look at, I don't know. Yeah, I think well, honestly, I'd go back to the live stream, even though it's a little ADD. But to Brian's question, I talked to your pastor. I don't know what kind of church you're at. I would just talk to them first. The other thing is, confession can be done in small group. It can be done. I have a friend, that I'll call, just be like, man, I gotta talk. So it can be done one-on-one. There is something I will say, I really have come to appreciate the sort of liturgy that my church has, even though, again, we're not high church, we're not Catholic, we are Reformed, we're PCA. Sorry, I guess I should just say we're Presbyterian, but I guess there's lots of ways you can define Presbyterian. So, and there's something to that. There's something to that corporate confession that says you are in a room of brothers and sisters, and we are all imperfect, So I don't know. So Brian, I would just talk to the pastor, and then I would explore that. I've really wanted to do a retreat, like a silent retreat at like a monastery or something like that. Again, going back to, Joe Rogan was talking to Alan Graham, about the Camino, the pilgrimage that he did. And, I would love to do something like that, but, yeah, that's where I'd start. I would start local, start where you are attending, start where you do, you are a part of a worship life of a church. And that's where I would start to explore confession and then go out from there. I would, with the guidance of any leaders or any people you trust from that church. Man. PVK passes 30,000. Yes. Yeah, definitely. I can vouch for Chad, man. Chad knows the steps. Brian, he's got a channel called, Friday Morning Nameless. If you want to check that out, I will get you the link right here, right now. And yeah, there's a lot of good people around. Friday Morning Nameless, Paul Vanderklay. These are all good people.
Greetings and welcome to the...
Chad, have you done, do you have any videos specifically on this topic of confession or anything like that you can point to? You said you can help. This is Chad's channel. Ooh, did it link? Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's the Friday Morning Nameless channel. Do you want to unpack what you mean by the fourth and fifth step? Chad, is that a AA reference? What are the fourth and fifth steps in AA? Any other questions too? Because that's kind of me wrapped. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about, man. I'm kind of tired. It's emotionally exhausting to talk about all the like satanic stuff going on. And so it's just time to point to the glory. What did we say? My body is true food. My body is true food. My blood is true drink. And what were we saying? Oh, the foolish things of the world that confound the wise. That's another one. Yeah, okay. Fourth step, take an inventory. Fifth step, confession. It actually, gosh, it's so fascinating, right? It's so funny, right? And this is, I think, to Brian and Chad's point, just that the confession actually works, that these steps actually work. Like it's part of that re-enchantment. It's part of that entry into the mystery. It's like, I don't know exactly why. I don't know why prayer works. But I was told to do it by the God who created all things. And so I'm going to just sort of like trust that. And I think it's that sort of modern sort of reductionist naturalism that says, oh, whatever, that's just like chemicals going off in your brain. And it's not really, no, it's transformative. Like it is transformative. I would say like participating in communion is transformative. I mean, these are, and maybe it's not like, what do people expect? You know, when I say transformation, what do people expect? Like some crazy thing? It's like, it doesn't have to be that, but incrementally there is change happening. And I would say this, when you start to confess your wrongdoing to the person that you wronged, that is transformation. That's transformational. When I was doing my undergrad, we were talking about restorative justice and some of these things, some of the reasons why the prison system doesn't work. And there was this group, I believe that they were heavily Christian, though the organization was not itself a Christian organization, that was going into juvenile detention centers and taking young people who had committed like violent crimes and bringing them, and it was all done with the permission of everybody, but basically bringing the two parties together, where the young person would ask for forgiveness, and then the person who had been offended would extend forgiveness to that young person. And their recidivism rate, the rate of young people going into prison or graduating into adult prison, plummeted. Like, it plummeted because they were doing confession. Like, think about that. Like, I don't have the study right in front of me, but I believe it was a couple of juvenile detention centers in New Zealand. And just like, I remember doing this when I was a missionary, because we all lived real close together. So it was, you were kind of daily stepping on each other's toes and probably doing something you shouldn't. I would always just like, hey man, you know what? I accidentally used your toothpaste. I didn't mean to. And when I used it, I didn't put it back. I'm really sorry about that. It's just like that simple. And it changed the culture of our homes. It's wild. So anyway, I agree with you. It totally works. Humbling action is a tremendous mystery. Yeah. Humble yourself. Yeah. Okay, so to Emily's point, okay, hey, at least the Olympic controversy might get people interested in learning about the significance of the Last Supper. You're exactly right. It's the foolish things of the world that confound the wise. God is not mocked. You're right. Like, it's like, let's say they they came out and they said, we're not really mocking Christians. Fine, whatever. Let's say they weren't really mocking Christians. But let's say they were. Fine. Then, that clip, there was a clip from Joe Rogan in this, in the What Do You Mean video, where he's like, why are Christians always mocked? Why is it always the Christians that are so mocked? Like, sure, other religions are mocked, but why? What does everybody have? Like, why is it so focused on Christians? So it gets people thinking, it gets people talking about, like, what is this Last Supper thing? Yeah, so cool stuff, man. And again, and you know what? I should pull it back up. But that What Do You Mean video, he talks about how we should respond. And I think he's so right. I think that how we respond to, let's say it's, Christianity is being mocked, the Last Supper is being mocked, which is like on its face horrible. Like, if you think about the significance and how important that is to Christianity. Hello, yeah, like, that's just like pretty nasty. You're going right after the heart there of Christianity. But but it's gonna end up bringing people to Christ. Yeah, probably, probably. So yeah, he does go into this, and I left the link in the description. Just how do you respond? How you respond is actually going to show people, what was that verse? Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify your God in the day he visits us. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. Lovely stuff. So yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for hanging out. Brian, thank you. Yeah. Again, I always kind of feel like I'm a little ADD, and then it gets hot. Last week I left my air conditioner on, but I just felt like it was kind of annoying. I thought it was going to be cool enough up here that I could turn it off, but of course, it's starting to get a little hot up here. So, man, I appreciate you all being here. Again, check out. Let's see, where do we go from here? I would say if you haven't checked this one out, The Missing Person of the Gospel, give that a whirl. And then look for this Alan Graham one. That's awesome. And then the other two that I have in the works, well, I've got a couple of things in the works. One might be a little live stream with one PVK. Again, I'm not trying to promise too much here. Probably won't be on this channel. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't. And then I've got two this little corner conversations coming up. One that's going to feed off of, this will be an interesting one because it actually is part of this conversation about the geopolitical situation going on. I'm going to find it. Sorry, it's scrolling. The Secrets at Skinwalker Ranch was a video I did a while ago. And Sean Ryan just went back to Skinwalker Ranch. Now, this is heavily tied to the LDS Church. And there's a push. And I don't exactly see the whole picture, but it ties into this whole theme that we've been talking about. One of the things that Jonathan Peugeot pointed out in his video about the Luciferian spirituality was that it's idiosyncratic. It's all about the person. It doesn't matter what contradictions might unfold. And so you see the LDS Church, you see the uniting of something like the LDS Church, the transhumanist movement, which is essentially atheistic, the Luciferian, this Satanic movement, which is essentially atheistic as well, combined with Islam and Marxism. Islam and Marxism are not that far off from each other, ideologically speaking. And so it's really interesting to see all these things play out. And then, again, just part of me goes to the book of Revelation and the fact that the beast comes out of the water with a bunch of blasphemous names written on its head, right? You guys remember that passage? Maybe it's part of that. Again, I'm not saying that we are... I tend to believe that Jesus ascended to heaven. We are in the end times. It's going to be like birth pains. It's going to gradually get worse, and then the end will come. I don't speculate on the dates and times, and I'm not saying that we are in the end of the end, but there's a process going on, and we are in that process. And so the beast coming with these blasphemous names on its head, there's something like that. When you see the LDS Church and the transhumanists and the Marxists and the and then Islam and all of this kind of sort of uniting. So that's in the works. I talked with Jeremy about that, and then kind of explored the sort of this sort of Jewish tradition of the Christian Messiah. That'll be an interesting one. So again, just stuff coming up that you can be on the lookout for. Man, I've appreciated hanging out with you guys tonight. And yeah, you know what? Maybe Kale and the Harry Potter one, and then Dr. Louis Marcos. Those would actually be good because we're talking about how, in a sense, God uses these pagan traditions. He's sort of conversant with them. He's not afraid of them, but he reveals the true meaning of what those might be. So those would be good podcasts. And then hit me up on X if you have any questions. Yeah, love to chat more. So you guys have a great night, and I will catch you